The Obama administration is making a stronger push to urge individual states to phase out the use of solitary confinement. Citing psychological as well as economic arguments, the administration is looking to address the overuse of the tactic that many consider being akin to torture. So Obama's been pressing states recently to undo the use of solitary confinement. This is actually coming on the heels of, so last year in July of 2015, he gave a speech at the NAACP National Convention in which he asked Attorney General Loretta Lynch to look into the overuse of solitary confinement. And from there, the Department of Justice actually released a report citing different issues of why it should be used very specifically, only in certain circumstances. It should never be the default form of punishment for prisoners. They should end the practice of placing juveniles in solitary confinement, etc. So one of the reasons that Obama is wanting to do this is he refers to this as being an affront to our common humanity. Individuals from the United Nations have called for a global ban on solitary confinement in all but very exceptional cases. And scientific research has actually revealed many psychological disorders, including depression, suicidal thoughts, hallucinations, paranoia, etc. So the reason why he's going, or the Obama administration is going specifically after states is the fact that, he can give a federal injunction, but it doesn't really help if states are not on board, because right now there's as many as 100,000 people in solitary confinement, but only 10,000 of those are isolated in federal prisons. The 90,000 remaining, that's all state prisons. So he really needs to get states on board with that.
Right. Well, we knew that the president came out against or gave an opinion over juvenile solitary confinement last year. We began to really hear his opinions on that. It centered around the Khalif Browder case, this young man who committed suicide. He was put into prison, shuffled around. It was over allegedly stealing a backpack. And he remained in and out of solitary confinement a lot. He later committed suicide once he was out of prison. And the isolation of a prisoner as a form of punishment, we know that that could have irreversible consequences on that person's psyche permanently. You mentioned hallucinations. I don't know if you recall the case of the 3 hikers in Iran. They were caught. One woman detailed her solitary confinement for over 10 months. And she even said that she would be screaming and she didn't know, she was hallucinating. She didn't know if she was actually screaming or if it were other prisoners. And the only way that she realized it was her, or when guards would come and put their hands over her mouth. So it can really do undue damage to a person psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, in every way that a person could be damaged with this type of punishment. And we seem to accept it, Joya, because it happens to people that are incarcerated.
Exactly.
We think they deserve it when it's barbaric.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's very easy when you're dealing with prisoners and you're basically just tossing them into a cell and throwing away the key.
Yeah.
If you're being mistreated, for example, or if you're being underfed, or if anything is happening to you, but you're in total isolation, there's nobody for you to even communicate with about. So there's many issues where, for example, he talks about the Angola 3, which is these individuals that were placed in solitary confinement for over 40 years in a Louisiana prison after the killing of a corrections officer. So of course they used the solitary confinement as punishment, but 40 years in there, you know what I mean? And also there's been a lot more information coming out. There's been hunger strikes on behalf of prisoners that are protesting solitary confinement. That happened in 2013. Also in 2013, Rolling Stone released an article called Slow Motion Torture, where they're really addressing this issue. So you have certain situations where, yes, it might make sense to isolate prisoners depending on the circumstance, but really it doesn't create any more of a safe environment. So one of the reasons that prisons use this is that it's supposed to contribute to the safety of corrections officers. However, if you put people into a 6 by 9 foot cell and they kind of go bonkers, that can actually increase aggressive behavior. So those are a couple of the things that he cites. But again, bringing it back to how important it is for states to get on board. So Roy Austin is Obama's Deputy Assistant for Urban Affairs, Justice, and Opportunity. He's one of the leading architects of this legislation and of these measures. And he has this to say. He says, "We know a lot of change is local. In the criminal justice space, we represent a small percentage of the number of people arrested and incarcerated. So we are here to provide technical assistance to learn from states that are getting it right and to serve as a shining example of what can be done. So a few of those states, for example, Colorado over the last 5 years has really tried to do away with a lot of this. They, basically just dealing with different ways of addressing whether it be violence amongst prisoners or what have you, allowing them to work their way out of solitary confinement, at least allowing them out of their cells for physical activities, etc. New York has banned isolation cells on Rikers Island for individuals 21 years and under. They're looking to phase out the use of solitary confinement for kids under the age of 18, and that's supposed to happen at the end of June. So it's really trying, these states that are making these steps, it's trying to put pressure on different states that are still using it.
You have states like Louisiana that are in full force. They're resisting this move.
Exactly.
This federal move.
You have Texas that has over 6,000 prisoners in isolation. There's Florida that has over 12,000 individuals in isolation. That's more than all of the federal prisoners. So yeah, I mean, it's, I don't know. I think it gets really dicey because so many people have issues not only with the prison industrial complex, but just how we deal with prisoners. I did a story earlier this week about how Loretta Lynch is releasing a roadmap to reentry to try to rehabilitate prisoners that are coming back into society. It's really just chipping away at this crazy system that we've gotten ourselves into, where there's so many people incarcerated and so many people that we're like, we don't even know where they are. We don't, if somebody dies while they're in solitary confinement, how are we going to know?
Treating them in a less than human way. Just taking that back to Florida really quickly, I know we have to wrap this, but Marco Rubio, we covered this on The Lip, and the Post has covered this extensively, the Washington Post, that Marco Rubio actually took all of this money from GEO Private Prison, which was a massive prison lobby on the Hill, to build private prisons in Florida. So that makes total sense that he would, your senator is building more prisons in your state, and you have thousands of people in solitary confinement.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Well, the for-profit prison situation is a whole other
for another
debacle.
Day, but part of this.
But then also, so you and I are kind of talking about the moral landscape of this, but also Obama, the administration acknowledges the cost of it. So we're talking about, for a study that was released in 2007, estimated that a single solitary cell cost about $75,000 a year. That's 3 times more than just regular incarceration. So even if you think, oh, these are prisoners, these are felons, they're convicts, we don't need to worry about their dignity or their civil liberties, but goodness gracious, that's a lot of cost to taxpayers. So we'll see how these moves continue to deal with the mass incarceration issue. But in the meantime, at least the Obama administration is reining in the use of solitary confinement.